that was supposed to lead to a complete end of the war, a withdrawal of the IDF troops and forces from the Gaza Strip, places like the Philadelphia corridor along the border between Gaza and Egypt, as well as the declaration by Israel that the war is over, Israel is not moving to that second stage. Instead, it wants something more like a 1.2 or 1.5, basically an extension of stage one. For now, the Americans are supporting Israel's position, which is give us back more hostages, we'll release more Palestinian prisoners. But Hamas, as of now, is not playing ball, says we want Israel to stick to the original terms of the deal and move to stage two, declare that the war is over. So where is all this heading? As we know, 25 men are alive and waiting in the Gaza Strip. Their time is running out. It is not on their side. And what is Netanyahu's strategy to get them back? Is it the threat of resuming the war? Is it putting an end to aid, humanitarian aid, and other supplies, as was decided on Sunday, when Israel suspended all delivery of goods to Gaza as another way to put pressure on Hamas? Or is there some other initiative at play with the Americans to get them to put pressure on the mediators, the Qataris and the Egyptians, who in return will put the pressure on Hamas? We'll have to wait to see. On today's episode, I'm joined by Professor Michal Siegal and Shmuel Rosner, two senior fellows at JPPI, to do the weekly check-in, see what's happening with the hostage deal, with the ceasefire, and whether the war is about to renew. Stay with us.
Michal and Shmuel, it's great to have you both back on the podcast. And as has often been the case over the last few weeks, we've been doing our opening episode of the week, kind of doing a check-in of where things stand. And of course, as is the case oftentimes in our lovely country, everything is moving into the extreme. Over the weekend, basically, the first stage of the hostage deal, the stage that was supposed to bring back the first 33 of the hostages, most of them living hostages, some of them bodies, has been completed. And Israel was supposed to move forward and advance together with Hamas to the second stage of the deal that was eventually supposed to see the Israeli withdrawal from places like the Philadelphia corridor or other parts of the Gaza Strip and institute a complete ceasefire across Gaza. Under the second stage, it would begin to see the release from Gaza of additional living hostages. 25 who are left. And I'm sure that both of you probably saw the cover of the Haaretz magazine this past Friday and weekend, which had the faces of the 25 men who are left in Gaza, those who are believed at least to be alive, with profiles of them. Very, very moving and very important, I think, to read and to catch up on who exactly these people are. But Israel has now said, we're not ready to move to stage two with American backing. We want something called like 1.1 or 1.5, or basically an extension of stage one. Hamas has not said it won't accept that. And in response, Israel on Sunday suspended all humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, or all aid that would go into Gaza, so it should not be going to Hamas. So, Shmuel, why don't you start us off? Where is all of this going? Is the hostage deal now done, or is Netanyahu have some trick up his sleeve?
Well, you started by saying something interesting. You said that things are moving forward quickly from week to week, and it's true in one sense, but in a different sense, things are really static for a long time now. We are stuck with the same question and the same dilemma for a number of months now. And the dilemma is quite simple. Israel wants all hostages back. It also wants Hamas to cease to exist in Gaza. And these two things cannot mix. They aren't compatible. And this, we could overlook this fact during the first phase of the hostage deal, in which we could blur the fact that Hamas did not agree to eliminate itself. Israel did not agree to accept it as the ruling entity over Gaza. And we could move forward with the deal up to a point. And then came the point in which Israel had to renegotiate before it can move to stage two. And Israel still wants Hamas out. and Hamas still wants to stay in. So there's not much to negotiate, and that's why Israel now begin to try to convince Hamas, to you called it stage 1.1 or 1.5. We are trying to prolong the period in which we can blur or ignore this essential dilemma that is unresolved. How do you get all hostages back and ensure the elimination of Hamas? For now, Israel does not have a clear answer for this question. I don't see anyone coming up with a clear answer. Some Arab nations are trying to come up with different solutions. President Trump has had this idea of, sending Gazans to other places. I don't see this moving forward. So right now, Israel doesn't want to give up on its goal. Hamas would not agree to release all hostages and then find itself with no cards in the next stage of negotiations. And this is where we are.
I like the use of the word cards. That's you took that from Donald Trump in his meeting with Zelensky, where he said to the Ukrainian president, "You just don't have the cards." But Michal, to Shmuel's point about how Israel is trying to, what do we say in Hebrew, like largish im v'liot bli or something like that, like to do it all at the same time and have the cake and eat it too. Is that really what we're talking about to some extent? Is further politicization of this hostage deal? Because let's remember, stage 2 is a declaration that war is over. Stage 2 is pulling IDF troops out of Gaza. Stage 2 is basically saying we're done. Maybe one day in the future we'll go back into Gaza, but not right now. That's not something Netanyahu is willing to do, even if it gets back to 25 living hostages at least. There's still another 35 or so dead hostages in Gaza. But is that how you see it as well? This is just more politics once again?
Yeah. I do not think that this has anything to do with actually destroying Hamas. We've been trying for 500 days to destroy Hamas as much as we can. We did everything we could. Literally, I have great trust in the army. Maybe I shouldn't, but like most Israelis, I do trust our army to do the right decision mostly, and to, regain back their abilities after the horrific, position we were put in October 7th. They tried several times doing very, very extreme, taking very extreme measures to eradicate Hamas. And they couldn't eradicate Hamas all the way. And it's a big question, can you even do it? So the situation now where people say, no, but we haven't, we didn't succeed in it, so we should have another go at it, right? This could be a wish of many Israelis. All of us don't want to have Hamas in our borders. I think this is, agreed across the board. But is giving up on our hostages, putting aside the moral issue, the ethos of Israel aside, when you're looking at the picture at the moment, really, by not continuing to the next stage, by staying in the Philadelphia corridor, will that get us there? I don't for a second think that anyone in the leadership, and I'm very serious about this, actually think this is going to make a difference. I think the politicization of the situation is so critical. Actually, Bibi has said so openly on a few forums, and he was talking about, he has a coalition to maintain. He has a few things that he needs to pass, and this is part of a much larger political scheme, which will cost life, which will change Israel forever, and it rides upon some sentiment that all we really have, that, we want to eradicate Hamas. And it's riding on this popular sentiment. But in reality, this is not what we're facing. It's not eradicate Hamas or get the Khatufim back, the hostages. It's not about that at all. And it's just, you're looking at it from the sidelines, and you're saying this just really, because now I want to go back to this moral issue that I put aside and bring it back to the table and say this is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, especially seeing now the hostage family coming back and the stories you're telling, and we're not gonna get the eradication of Hamas but we will get the death of our hostages, and the ramification of that is just so horrendous that we'll have to pay the price morally as a country for a generation to come.
But Shmuel, I mean, I mentioned jokingly when you said the thing with the cards and Zelensky and Trump, but to make a comparison for a moment, Trump seems to be at least fully on our side, or fully on Netanyahu's side. Steve Witkoff, the Middle East special envoy, has basically said we're supporting Israel's demand to move to that 1.5 stage of the deal, not to go to stage 2. Trump has not come out against that. It seems that Israel does have the backing and the support of the Americans. Just over the weekend, they approved another several billions of dollars in munitions and military aid. And you see that when they want, they know how to crack down on a foreign leader. I mean, we saw that play out in the White House in the Oval Office on Friday. That's not the case here. So, I mean, and we know, for example, that Eli Sharabi, who I want to talk to both of you about in a bit, the hostage who did come back, and he gave this really super powerful interview that I strongly recommend that people watch. It's now circulating out there with subtitles, so you should be able to find it. To Israel's kind of version of 60 Minutes, what's known as Uvda, has now also been invited to the White House to meet with Donald Trump on Tuesday after Trump saw some of those parts. So his heart goes out to the hostages, but he's not pushing Bibi to do what Michal would like Bibi to do. I mean, how do you understand that dynamic?
Well, first of all, that is true, and we know that when President Trump pushed Netanyahu to go for the first stage of the deal, this is what Netanyahu did. So his support or his position is critical in this situation, and ultimately, it seems as if Prime Minister Netanyahu was able to convince President Trump or Steve Witkoff that his position is the right position for the moment. Now, why did Trump decide to back Netanyahu on this issue? Why did he decide that this is a good time to say stop and make more demands and ask Hamas to agree to this interim understanding of releasing more hostages before we move forward with negotiations for stage 2? I can't quite tell you. Clearly, that's the decision they made. Ron Dermer, Netanyahu's emissary, was there for a few days. He had conversations with senior officials in the Trump administration, and he was able to convince them that this is the right move at this moment. Remember, the Trump administration does believe in putting pressure on rivals. So maybe they think that by giving Israel more ammunition, that by untying Israel's hands and by signaling to Hamas and to everybody else that if Hamas does not agree to this 1.5 proposal, they will suffer dearly. Maybe putting such pressure with such aggression on the other side is going to bear some fruit. And Donald Trump is not a person who will shy away from putting pressure on someone like Hamas. So maybe he was convinced that it's worth trying to get more hostages back before Israel must face the more dramatic decision of whether to end the war. Maybe there are other reasons. Michal tends to suspect that it's all politics. We should mention that March is a critical political month for the coalition. They must pass a budget. So for Netanyahu to retain his ability to keep all his coalition partners happy until the end of the month, until after the vote on the budget, that's a critical thing. Maybe Netanyahu thinks, well, let's do this 1.5 stage that will take me through March, and then in April I'll be freer to do something else, or
right, because
to
once the budget passes, once the budget passes, there's really no way to bring down the government, and the government even if Smotrich, even if he decides to go to a second stage of the deal and call an end to the war, Smotrich could huff and puff, pull out of the coalition. But really, effectively, there's no other coalition, so Netanyahu can hang on even with a minority government for at least several months and keep it together, and then push off elections to the end of 25 and maybe even the
Oh,
beginning of
yeah,
26. I mean,
it's possible that this was explained to the Trump administration, and they told them, look, we are going to do it your way, but give me these 4 weeks because that's the only way I can keep my coalition together.
Michal, no, I'm coming to you, but I can see that you. This is just reinforcing what you were saying before. That again, I mean, the fact is that we're talking about saving the lives of 25 people abandoned by their country, and that's the reality. These people were abandoned by their country, where there were soldiers like Idan Alexander or Matan Cohen or whoever it is who were left along the border and were abandoned, or the people who are who were left abandoned in the kibbutzim and were taken. Whether it's Eitan Horn, who we saw that video, heartbreaking video of him saying goodbye to his brother Yair, who came back in a previous hostage swap. How are we talking about 25 lives and stupid petty politics?
I want to add something else to the politics, because you're talking just, Trump and Bibi and whatever. By the way, Zelensky is a good example of how we can flip and do the same thing to us, decide that he wants to force a deal on Bibi, a bad deal for Israel, and just, this is, we have to understand what it means when he can do something like that to Zelensky and just, abandon Ukraine and support Russia, flip completely United States policy towards Ukraine. So we have to look at this and understand that, Trump might be going our way in certain parts, but it can flip, depending on his need. But we forgot something else. We're told very openly that there's another factor here, which is money. We have a very substantial supporter of the Trump government, Miriam Edelson, who's pulling the string behind I'm translating from Hebrew, but who's pushing Trump towards this deal. And actually, we're told that we should really thank her for the deal to have taken place in the first place. And by the way, now we're told she's bringing her own plane and sending some of the hostage families to Trump to talk to him, to present a contra to Bibi's plan that he chose to support. By the way, I fully support this, and I think we owe her a great debt of gratitude for doing that. There are people who owe their lives to her. But we have to also say, this is where a person, because that person has a lot of money, she has sway over American policy towards Israel, and it's not just about politics, it's about money and who gets to decide whether the people of Israel get to live or die in the grand scheme of things. I just want to say, we're normalizing so many things that, maybe they existed before and we just didn't know, or there was a facade that we didn't know. Obviously, people with money always had more, influence and power over policymakers. But now it's right there in the open, right? We have Elon Musk.
Hon Shilton, as we call it, money and governance. Right.
Openly so. And the fact that it's just working in the direction that we wanted to, I wanted to go, obviously. But still, this is not how decisions about, and again, the ethics of Israel, the morals of Israel, about, leaving
the ethos
people,
of Israel. Yeah.
And that we have to rely on a billionaire, gazillionaire who wants this, and otherwise wouldn't have happened. This is not normal. This is not how society should act, and it looks like the world is going in that direction now.
I'm sorry to have to correct you, Michal. I have great love and admiration for you, but you spent so many years in academia that you might not know how the world really works. Yaakov and I spend most of our career in journalism. When you spend your time in Jerusalem and Washington covering the decisions of politicians, you know that politics and money always have a voice. If you think that any politician at any time is going to make decisions based on just,
Just what's right.
values, just what's right. And, it's a nice, we wish we could live in
No,
such
but
world,
there
but
is an important
that's
point.
not the world
You
in
know,
which we live.
of course, but I think what Michal's point also is that Israel's supposed to stand for something more than that, especially on this issue and this ethos of bringing our people back home, and that's something that we're failing to do. And I, today,
No, I'm not, I
no, of
don't want to
course, no, I
normalize
understand. I know.
the politicization of this
Yeah, of
issue. I'm
course.
just saying, yeah, you cannot be amazed by the fact that billionaires or political considerations go into this process of decision
I
making.
wanna ask you both. Over the weekend, the IDF released thousands of different reports of what happened in investigations that it ran into every single aspect pretty much of October 7th. So kind of like what led to October 7th, the intelligence failure, the operational failure, the border failures, the deployment, where was the Air Force for hours? How is it that the Air Force was bombing Hamas targets in Gaza when there were thousands of people running across into the kibbutzim and the Air Force was nowhere to be found? All of this stuff came out. It was a flood. I mean, there's no way that anybody here has been able to read all of it because the IDF did something brilliant that I was talking to my friends, because I used to be a military reporter and I still read a lot about the military. But I was talking with some friends who were at all these briefings, and I was explaining to them the IDF, what they did was brilliant. I mean, they flooded you. They gave out so much information. It all gets lost. Like nobody can follow everything that went on.
Information dump.
Exactly. Very well said. But my question is, and I wonder, all this happening with, and Shmuel, we've done a lot of polling at JPPI over the last definitely 16 months, looking at trust in the IDF. And we saw how it dropped dramatically in post October 7th. It climbed up. So I'm wondering where we are at the moment, but also how does this lack of, this information dump, as Michal called it, but all of these investigations that now come out, which show serious failures and flaws, how does that also impact, as now we need to consider, do we go back in and do this again?
Well, first of all, remember that a new chief of the IDF is going to start his position this week. Right. So everything we asked the public about trust in the upper echelon of the military is going to lose all relevance starting next week. There's a new chief of staff. He'll bring his own men into new positions. The whole high command of the IDF is going to be replaced and changed. And I think that what the public understands is when the public looks at the IDF, I'd say it has three main positions or three main viewpoints that it can adopt. Point number one, we still love, support, admire, and root for the soldiers. The IDF is first and foremost the soldiers, and these soldiers are our sons and daughters, our sisters, our brothers, our fathers. These are us. Many of us served in the military. Many of us served in the reserves, and if not us, then our first, very close circle of relatives. So the IDF as an institution is still something that Israelis see with great admiration and appreciation. Then you have the issue of performance, and the performance of the IDF at the beginning of the war was miserable. There's no doubt about it. We didn't have to wait for the reports to know that. The reports, they provided us with many new details. So now we can see the trees, but the wood was already there. We knew that the IDF did not perform well on October 7th, 8th, 9th, and maybe 10th of October. It then performed better during the war, both in Gaza and in Lebanon, which helped us somewhat recover understanding that the IDF can go back to its senses and can do some professional work that is still impressive. The third point, and I'll be brief here, is the question of trust in the most basic sense. Do we believe that they are doing their best? And in this sense, the IDF still enjoys much higher rating than any other institution in Israel. Even if we think that some of the officers were lacking in competence or didn't pay enough attention or all kinds of other things, we know that they meant well. We don't think that they were not politicizing their jobs. They were just, they did
They failed.
a poor job. They failed in their jobs, but we don't see them as people who are not honest or not well-meaning and all these things. So again, we look at the IDF with worry because we needed to perform well, but also with a sense that there are people in the military who truly want to make things better. And I think that's why the level of trust in the IDF did not crush, even though its performance was really miserable.
Michal, how do you see it after that kind of the weekend of all those different reports and the trust level? Like, how do you look at the army today?
I think we're gonna move to a new phase with the army. So Shmuel is right about our trust in the army, and he's right about this is our sons and daughters, and we believe in the army. But going forward, if Bibi has to recruit, the decision to break the pact now and go back to fighting in Gaza will mean a new recruitment of reserve, and it will mean fighting. It will mean sacrificing lives of soldiers. We haven't had losses in the past few months, and we gotten used to a year and a few months of every day, every week. And I am not sure we're in the same place we were before. Even in the trust in the army and the need for the army, we're not in the same place. First of all, we have an entire segment of Israeli society that doesn't want to go to the army, and we know that, right? And March is an important month because this is going to be on the table, whether to pass a law or not. Second, we have entire new groups of families who have suffered losses, and their friends and family now have to decide to send their kids back into harm's way. I think we might see a wave of, people still want to contribute, people still want to, defend the state of Israel, but I'm not sure they'll do it in the same, zealous spirit and depending obviously of what will happen now in March and with this law about the army and the fighting. So I think this is something that we need to take into account as well. The number of people willing to go and sacrifice their lives for this country, and in this political climate with the decision to sacrifice hostages, these are all very complex issue, which I'm not sure that while I'm talking, I have to stop for a second. While I'm talking, I've predicted that the sentiment will change and people will revolt against Bibi. This hasn't happened. I never thought Bibi would still be prime minister and we would still be fighting his political wars so long, and it still happened. So maybe we are doomed to continue doing this. I don't know. But I think things are a little bit different than they were before. And I think we might see, we see voices within the Dati Leumi sphere, the religious calling for, the recruitment of the Haredi people. So things are changing. That might make a difference in the attitudes toward the army and the fighting.
And I'll just say that you're right, that on Wednesday when Eyal Zamir, the new chief of staff, does take office, one of the first things that he is expected to do is clean house. And a lot of the generals and members of the general staff who were, let's say, their records are now tainted by the role that they played in the failures that led to October 7th, whether it's Oded Basuk, who's the head of the IDF operations director, or Tomer Bar, who's the commander of the Air Force, even Shlomi Binder, who was the deputy head of the operations, then was promoted last April, May, to become the head of military intelligence. All of these guys are apparently kind of targets potentially for being dismissed. And maybe that's also what's needed, because we do need to have trust in our military to be able to go forward. And whatever the challenges might be and whatever's on the horizon, whether it is a renewal of fighting and resumption of the ground offensive, or it's going to be get back the hostages, wait to see what happens, but be prepared for those challenges because the threats are not going away. We definitely do need a military that we can trust and rely on. So let me thank you both, Michal Barasher Siegal and Shmuel Rosner, for being with us today. And to all our listeners, as always, you can find us on Apple and Spotify, YouTube, and